Okay, today we're going to talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. In the summer of 1862, things were not going very well at all for the Union Army. As a matter of fact, the Union Army, when it comes to their fighting against the Confederates in Virginia, they continued to suffer major losses in the state of Virginia. Many of the people in the North were simply growing tired of the war. They felt like President Lincoln really had no clue as to lead this war. You can read newspaper articles from this time and you would see that they were very critical of Lincoln, of his generals, of his soldiers. They couldn't understand, why does the North have all of these supplies yet we cannot defeat the South. But the Union Army continues to suffer major losses. Lincoln knew that these people were tired of war. He also has a plan in mind that we'll learn about in just a second called the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, he knew that this was not a good time to be taking bold steps, so he decided, I'll take a bold step after the next major victory, major Union victory. The Union does give him this major victory at the Battle of Antietam in Maryland. Once this takes place, once the Union Army wins at Antietam in Maryland, Lincoln now knows, okay, now is the time for me to set my plan into motion. All right, the plan. All right, the plan is called the Emancipation Proclamation. In order to understand what those words mean, you need to look up the definition of the word emancipate and proclamation. Well, I've done that for you. Emancipate means to set free, or in our example that we're talking about, it means to set the slaves free. Proclamation is a public and official announcement. So in other words, Emancipation Proclamation is, or it means I'm going to, or Lincoln said, I'm going to tell the country that all slaves are now free. Now, Lincoln, remember, he waited until the major win in the battle at Antietam in Maryland, and he comes out, or he releases this into the papers at the time and announces across the country that I am now going to set all slaves free. And they will be free on January the 1st, 1863. After this date, all slaves are going to be free. Now, not all slaves, but rather he says all slaves in states in rebellion against the Union would be free. Now what this means is, say for example, slaves in Georgia, in Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, those other southern states, all those slaves would be free there. Now, we talked about before the border states. Lincoln did not really want to mess with the border states. If you remember, that's Kentucky and Maryland and Virginia. In those states they had slavery, but they supported the North. And Lincoln figured if he freed the slaves in those states, that would be more people that would join up with the South. So he wants to be to keep the peace in the border states. Next, a new goal. At the start of the war, the North, their goal was to simply keep the nation together. You can read some of Lincoln's speeches and you see that he talks about, I think it's the House Divided speech. He talks about how the country needs to stay together. That was kind of his focus and the focus of those living in the North. But after Lincoln releases the Emancipation Proclamation, the plans begin to change. Not only is it to keep the nation together, but now Lincoln wants to free the slaves. Okay? Lincoln is also very smart because he knows that the southern states were depending on England and France to come to their rescue. If you remember, we learned that previously in an earlier lesson. Well, what Lincoln knew that the southern states didn't know was England and France were against slavery. And so he knew that if he freed all the slaves, then England and France, if they're going to help anyone, it would be they were going to help the North. And so he knew that England and France are against slavery. That means there's no help for the South. Now the results. After the Emancipation Proclamation, news begins to spread, or it travels quickly from plantation to plantation. Word just, it's like a wildfire. It starts to spread. Slaves began to run away and they joined the Union Army. During the war, 200,000 African Americans became Union soldiers. 20,000 of those from the state of Tennessee escaped from Tennessee, and they go and they join the Union Army. Now, it's project time. You're going to work in groups, and I've got a couple of projects set up for you. And that's what we're going to spend the rest of class time today doing, is working together, looking at the Emancipation Proclamation. And in your groups you're going to be discussing today, what do these words mean, and was this a smart decision? Would you have done something different? Would you have done this sooner? Or would you have not done this at all? Thank you for your time.